Serious, people who has survived terrorist attacks. What are something you wish you knew beforehand that could have helped you during? A counter-terrorism officer came into our office to give us a talk last year, London, and he told us that if you have to hide, lock the door and do not open it to anyone, that the police will come and break down the door, because in Mumbai the terrorists were knocking on the hotel room doors shouting police, and when they got a response they shot through the doors. On Utøya, he was wearing a police uniform and shouted that he was police. It is scary as crap. I would never have let go of the hand of the friend that saved my life. Then he would have followed me and not ran down towards the water. He would have survived with me instead of being killed. And to charge my phone beforehand, so that I would have enough power to call my mum to tell her I was safe. This is one of the most chilling events in history for me. I just couldn't imagine what you went through, trapped on that island. I'm glad you survived and so sorry to hear about your friend. I don't know the technical definition of a terrorist attack, but I was in a building that was targeted by a serial arsonist. It might sound harsh, but I was not ready for how useless people become in a crisis. I was never really that worried. A lot of the ground floor was mostly made of stone and it had an old World War II panic room in it, so as long as we got some water into it, the building could burn down to the ground for all I cared. Not that it would be needed because we were fortunate to be on the first floor, and when the fire alarm went off the entire situation for us personally would be simple: find a window or door that's not on fire and get out. The entirety of my problem was my fellow co-workers. I felt like I was herding cats. Some just shut down, crying, not moving, which is fine to do after you're safe outside. Some idiot started moving up the stairs towards the wooden now ablaze part of the building, for ridiculous reasons like I need my cell phone. Others just blindly panicked. There were like 3 of us out of 50 plus that was of any use for anyone. Afterwards it felt like we could have evacuated in less than 5 minutes if people just had their head on their shoulders. Instead it felt like it took an hour, probably closer to 30 minutes. It may be worthwhile to run fire drills at least annually with your co-workers. We do one at my hospital in the US, and nobody panics when the alarm goes off because we know what to do without thinking about it. It's a complicated one. You're told not to run away because chances are they could be waiting to do even more harm. Running away is the normal mode. We live in a time where people stop the video. Again, 2 sides. Yes, super helpful for the police, but you're putting yourself in so much danger. Victims, help any way you can. Holes, try to close them. Put your finger in there. Take a sock off and tie it round. Try not to move them unless they can walk. Again, this is still dangerous. You don't know what has happened inside. Put pressure on all wounds. Please learn CPR and the recovery position. I was there when the bomb went off in Manchester, and I was sat there in my bra and ripped jeans because I had taken my clothes to help save others. I was teaching people CPR while the madness continued around us. Do CPR if you feel you can. You will do no harm in trying, but only if you are confident. Don't worry about pressing too hard. Breaking ribs is better than letting them die. I have 6 years nursing background, so yes, I knew what I was doing, but I was able to help others save others. Also, most CPR classes tell you will likely break ribs when you perform CPR anyway. I survived the really stupid terrorist attack in Edmonton the other day. So did everyone. Worst terrorist ever. I was in a position of responsibility and needed to get people away and out of the area. It turns out that people in situations like this are really stupid. People started fighting each other and throwing crap around. In the end, all I could do was just get out and let everyone else take their chances. I thank God that it was not worse, but it could have been very easy to kill a lot of people because they all just ran towards the dangerous situation. Honestly, if I am ever in another situation like this, I'm looking after me and only me. I'm not getting brained by office equipment again because I want to keep people safe. The Edmonton attack would have been a lot worse if the officer had not fought off the terrorist while being stabbed. The attacker was trying to get his gun and continue the rampage. Experience of 2 bombings in the past. I don't really think there is anything I could have known that would have helped. It happens too fast and the aftermath is too chaotic to really whip out a pro tip that will make much difference. As a recent university graduate in Switzerland, I had 2 very unfortunate brushes with terrorism during the rise of the new wave of attacks in Europe in the past few years with ISIS. This includes the Charlie Hebdo hyperculture market attacks in Paris, 2015 and Brussels bombings a year later. Both times I was in the respective cities visiting friends and traveling. If you hear firearms, it's best to immediately find hard cover and assess your surroundings. Cracks means the bullets are coming towards your direction. So at the point it might be best to just run in the opposite direction through back streets and alleys until you can find help or some sort of security apparatus such as a squad of police officers. Have your head on a swivel. Be ready to react to the situation at hand. This might sound harsh and selfish, but it's probably best not to help any victims you see unless you're a trained medical professional or the area is safe enough. Probably a good idea to have some sort of tourniquet Israeli military bandage on you at all times. Knowing some basic first aid helps too. Better safe than sorry if you ask me. If you hear or see explosions, first of all congratulations, because you weren't killed in the blast. Best to avoid crowded areas. Affected building in this scenario. Falling rubble and getting trampled by crowds is a pretty crappy way to go, all things considered. Communicate. Find security apparatuses. Avoid crowds and public transportation. Never give up and just do your best to keep collected and think of the next move. Stay safe out there. Unfortunately, sometimes you're just dealt a crap hand of cards and you become a victim in the opening volleys of an attack where you don't expect it at all. I've been directly involved in 4 suicide attacks, 2 vehicle, 2 vest, over the course of 3 deployments and numerous firefights. Unfortunately, there isn't much to take away from it. Suicide attacks specifically. Vehicle attacks are a little easier to identify before they happen, but this also assumes you're on guard for it. The thing that I've learned is that by the time you realize what's happening, it's too late. The best thing you can do is get down, find cover, and try to assess the situation. It may be over. It may be just getting started. In the case of this recent attack in Las Vegas, I saw a lot of blowhards talking about what they would have done. Mostly, it was return fire. What they don't know is how difficult it is to engage an elevated target from the ground since gravity is pulling down on your rounds fired the instant they exit the barrel. All you can do is get down. A low profile will make you a more difficult target to hit and seek cover. From there, assess the situation. If you are sure you have sufficient cover, stay where you are and tell others to stay with you. I saw a lot of blowhards talking about what they would have done. Mostly, it was return fire. Returning fire is such a stupid idea when the guy is that far away, in a building occupied by people. If you miss, which you will, you're shooting into someone else's room. I notice that a lot of people here basically say the same thing. It happening so quickly, not knowing what is going on. Mass panic trauma. This is why I still think the best thing you can do is just be responsible to get yourself out of harm's way first along with your loved ones, and then administer help once you get your bearings. There is not really a flowchart of what you can do the second someone starts shooting other than get you and your family to a safe place as quickly as possible and then assess the situation, administer aid. I am a World Trade Center survivor. What I wish I knew that despite what you hear on TV about courageous and heroes, etc., that is utter balls. I was in the concourse with a broken leg due to the explosion and not one person helped me. I was trampled on, pushed aside and ignored except for one police officer who got me out and went back in to help others get out. His body was found 6 months later. As far as regular people helping regular people, that is a crock of crap. People are only out for themselves. My husband survived the WTC attack. He pretty much told me the same thing. People become idiots when panic strikes. Stay calm. Find the nearest exit. Seems simple and yet everyone forgets these things when they absolutely think they're about to die. I was a senior in high school in Oklahoma when the bombing happened in '95. I didn't go to help, but I heard so many people talk on the news about how if more people who were there helping just knew simple buddy aid, more people would have been able to be helped. Just knowing how to bandage a wound or where to use a tourniquet is easy and can save a life. Keep calm and find a way out. Listen to the police or whoever is in charge. Once you've cleared the space, stay out of the way but be available if statements are needed. Not a legit terror attack, thankfully, but experienced a SWAT evacuation in DC after 9/11 and all we knew was that CNN was reporting a biological terror threat. Turned out to be homemade and ineffective bomb. Also, if you evacuate a building, don't go to a likely secondary dangerous site. Some of my group ended up at a train station, which would have been a big secondary target instead of the street in front of the building. With something like Las Vegas, the open air was the most dangerous due to a sniper position, so in the panic of the moment sometimes it's luck where you end up. There's little that could have helped me or prepared me, to be honest. With a bombing, it's just life being totally normal, and then in an instant the smell of burning people. Nothing can prepare you for that. And for anyone wondering, 2001's Barrow suicide bombing Jerusalem. I don't really like to think about the event, but I will tell you that the smell of burning flesh, burning pizza, and parents screaming for their children who were maimed by explosives and shrapnel isn't something that you forget. It's not the sound of the bombing, it's the yells and cries of the survivors when they find their loved ones maimed that really haunts you. I hope you're doing okay now. I haven't been in any form of attack thankfully, but I do work in the security field. One piece of advice I can offer is that if you manage to get to a safe space, your instinct will be to contact loved ones. However, so will everyone else. So getting through might be very hard. So, whenever possible, update your voicemail message to say that you are okay, where you are, and if you intend moving elsewhere. Eventually, that message will get through to your mobile provider's servers. When others hear of the attack, they will try to contact you. If they get through, great. If not, they will get your voicemail and will know that you are okay. Thank you. Earthquake City here and in a big shake, the first to go if no damage is still cell networks and FTPs. Also cash is king in a natural disaster aftermath. I've lived in London most my life. When the 7/7 attacks happened, I was working at an office just down the street from Russell SQ, where the bus blew up. I remember being really annoyed when they cancelled all the tube trains while I was waiting on the platform at Swiss Cottage at the start of my commute. After an appropriate period of grumbling, I then boarded a bus that was subsequently cancelled when it reached Oxford Street. That was when I first had a feeling that something was wrong. Bear in mind this was before smartphones, so no one really knew what was happening. As I was walking down Oxford Street towards the office, I received a frantic call from my mum to make sure I was alright. After I arrived at my job, they put the office on lockdown because there were police everywhere. After a few hours watching the news reports, I eventually managed to convince my boss to let me leave, as it was clear that no work was going to be done that day. I made my way to a pub where a friend was working as a bartender. Slowly my other friends began to arrive. Spent the rest of the day and night watching the news on the projector screen and having beers. I literally went to the pub, had a cold pint, and waited for the whole thing to blow over. Not sure if that's the best advice, but that's what I and my friends did. I literally went to the pub, had a cold pint, and waited for the whole thing to blow over. I love you. I wasn't in any personal danger, but I directly saw the Parliament attack in London and the murder of the police officer. I was about 50 yards away when all of a sudden people started running in all different directions, but I still had no idea what was happening. I looked over and saw a police officer being attacked with what I thought was a baton. I figured that the officer had tried to arrest someone, lost his baton, then been attacked with it until the officer fell down. Pretty much immediately after that, 3 shots rang out and the terrorist fell backwards and was moving slowly on the floor. That's when I realized he had a big knife and this wasn't an arrest gone wrong. I didn't see the car hitting people on the bridge as I was on a different side to that. After the attack happened, there was mass panic on the streets. Police were everywhere and people were running in all different directions, with reports of another attack happening at Trafalgar Square from passers-by. I've never driven out of London so fast in all of my life. I went through one-way streets and everything to get out of there, and as anyone who's been caught in an incident will know, there is a massive amount of confusion going on all around you. The one thing I wish though is that I was close enough to the attack to help the officer. I know I would have at least tried to help, as it's the right thing to do, plus I work as a gardener and have an axe hanging up in my van that I could have used to help. I don't think running up there with an axe would have been that great an idea actually. I was at the Boston Marathon when the bomb went off. I wasn't close to the finish line but heard and felt the explosion. People started running, and if you didn't run, I honestly think you would have been killed getting run over by people. There was a child standing and screaming and people were just bumping into her, obviously no parents around as the crowd was insane, and she fell to the ground and people kept running. I ran into the crowd and grabbed her, picked her up and ran with her with me and some friends. I obviously was not prepared in the situation and I think I did the right thing. But I wish people would stop and assess their surroundings and ensure it's a safe spot and people around you are safe too and you're not adding to the injuries. In my defense, I had no idea what was going on. All I knew was something had gone very wrong and this child was by herself, being ignored and terrified. This child fought me the second I grabbed her, complete terrified, and I didn't have a chance to calm her down until we got somewhere safe, which I imagine is what everyone was doing. Terrified. But yeah, assess your surroundings no matter how scared you are. First ensure you are safe and that the situation is safe, and then if possible the people around you. If you can help one person then do it. If you can't then run. But don't add chaos to chaos. If you happen to be calm enough, assist others in trying to stay as calm as they can, and if you are by yourself, find someone or a group that you can join and stay together. Buddy system. Don't forget to get names too. You very likely saved that kid's life. You're a good person. I grew up in the Middle East and went to an international school. Terrorist attack drills were a thing we did. Kind of surprising to hear that a lot of Americans don't know how to hide in a building. It might be time to include this sort of training in our schools now. After all those terror attacks in Europe recently, I have the reflex of looking at the exits and places I can hide, even though I've never been in one. In 2008 there were shots and grenades fired where I lived. Let me just say, the country I come from, houses are made of bricks and concrete. Yet the terrorists were using high caliber gun rifles that the bullets pierced through the walls. The biggest thing I recommend is 1. Turn off the lights to your house and hide in the bathroom. Most houses in my country, at least one bathroom is in the middle of the house away from outside walls. I did this and lived. Some of my neighbors weren't so lucky because they wanted to be nosy and stare out the window, or they panicked and tried to run to their cars. I lost 17 neighbors that day. Cars provide no meaningful cover against rifles. They're just metal boxes to get shot in. I was at a college shooting. I was walking on the sidewalk and saw a bunch of police cars speeding. Out of curiosity, I jogged after them to see what was going on and saw them jump the curb onto the lawn. I was probably 70 yards away from the building where it happened. The police ran towards the building as fast as they could. I watched. About 20 seconds later, a student walked out. I couldn't see well from that far away, but he looked hurt from the way he was walking and there was a big stain on his chest that he had his hand on. Blood, I thought. I immediately said to my friend, "We've gotta get out of here," and walked away from the scene fast. A minute later we saw a professor or administrator running towards us saying, "Get in a building. Now. Run. Head towards the music hall." That's when it hit us that it must be bad. We did as we were told. In the chaos, you don't know if there are multiple shooters, if the shooter is dead, if it was an accident, if it was a fight, if it was terrorism, whatever, and no one knows. They won't for a while. Don't try to figure it out. My advice is this: if you hear a bunch of sirens, do not follow them. Go away from the action. It's not cool. It's not fun. Just go. That's what people do in my country. Sad. When you have an instinct to run, advise everyone else surrounding you to bolt with you. Not just your friends, family you are there with, but strangers too. It's a bit hard because a lot of people panic, run, and trample, but we were able to safely get away from the mass shooting since we ran while everyone else was confused and stood around. I haven't survived a terrorist attack, but I do have combat training. For situations like Vegas where it's trauma from gunshot wounds, you should learn how to create a tourniquet out of whatever you can find and how to properly apply them. It can save lives, but you should learn how to do it quickly and efficiently because you have a limited window if the person has an arterial bleed. Keep in mind that when applying a tourniquet on a bleeding person that it will be slippery from blood, so practice. It's best to do it in an environment with gel to simulate blood on the limb of the dummy so you have experience on what real world conditions will be. I've seen a lot of incorrect instructions on the internet on the placing of tourniquets. It should be placed as close as you can to where the limb meets the torso, so up in the shoulder or groin areas depending on the limb. This is because the artery is closest to the skin in these areas, making it easier to close. Another note, Properly applying tourniquets is incredibly painful for the person receiving it. It has to be in order to tighten it enough to stop the bleeding. You have to hurt them to save them. There are a lot of misconceptions that tourniquets cause the chance of losing a limb. This is a myth, and the tourniquet would have to be on the limb for a very long time, up to a day, for it to really cause the need to lose a limb over the application of one. More than enough time for the person to get medical help, so don't be afraid to use it. Think about what you will do ahead of time if something happens. You'll probably never have imagined that exact scenario, but just visualizing what you could do will get you through that first moment of panic a little faster. For example, if I hear gunshots, I'm going to run immediately and find cover, and to that point, know what gunshots sound like. They don't sound like they do in the movies, and precious moments where you think what is that can cost you. Err on the side of caution and leave the area immediately. Late to the party, but I wanted to share some advice that probably hasn't been given. I was in Munich during last year's shooting. I didn't know where the shooter was in the city, but while at the Hofbrauhaus everyone started to hit floor as though the shooter was there, and I had to flee with my wife. Anyway, something that helped me that may help you, and it might sound ridiculous at first, is to put some time into playing a first-person shooter game, especially online where you're playing against people and not the computer. I've logged a bunch of hours in the past, but it teaches you, in a kind of roundabout way, how to look for cover, how to react to a shooter being in different areas, what your best option might be in a given circumstance, that is, trapped in a room. I credit all the time I put into playing those games with giving me even the slightest instinct to find cover and escape the situation I was in. I was at the Louvre this February. A lone terrorist broke into the museum and attacked the guards with machetes. Thankfully, the French police took the guy out pretty quickly. However, the first several minutes of not knowing were terrible. We heard yelling. We heard him get shot. There were alarms and shouting, and all the guests were ushered into the basement, and we were smooshed like sardines. What helped me was 1. Listening to my gut. The alarms went off and we knew something was wrong. My friends and I immediately locked arms and found out what information we could, all while looking around every corner for danger. 2. Not letting go of the shirts of my friends. We stuck together, and not letting go made me feel so much better. 3. Listening to the Louvre staff and trusting them. We were scared. We didn't speak French well. We were lost in the museum. If everyone had just acted of their own volition, it would have been chaos. 4. Talking about it afterwards. I never expected to be in a terrorist attack, and even thought it was relatively minor. I now hate touristy places and big crowds. I was at the Boston Marathon, across the street and between both bombs. One thing that I regret is not getting my family out of there fast. It was a chilling moment, and instead of getting away we practically stood in place where we were. Stay away from the windows and hide until you can hear the voices of someone you know calling for you. I grew up in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and my house was a block away from where a couple car bombs went off after jihadists shot people. Having grown up in Northern Ireland in the 90s, Zeros have seen and heard a few was caught up in a 500 pounds car bomb. That was an experience. Slept through another which I was 400 meters from. Seen a mortar fired at police patrol. Used to be regular small arms fire where I lived. I mean, come on, the still control the area and carry out punishment shooting beatings, so it's not really a thing I think about except for traffic diversions and stop checks every few months. Stay classy, Derry Elderi Dora. Someone mentioned calling the emergency services quietly if in a hiding situation. Something I found out fairly recently is that you can text the emergency services, but you have to register first, at least in the UK. If you live in the UK, text register to 999 and you're good to go. I imagine other countries have similar setups, so Google it. It's terrifying to see just how many people have been able to respond with first-hand accounts of attacks. Though I don't know if this is testament to the number of people who get caught up in attacks or to the number of people who read Reddit. Hopefully the latter. When major events happen, cell towers are often overloaded. Don't panic if you can't send messages to your loved ones right away. They'll send eventually. And memorize at least one phone number. Mom, Dad, so, kids, etc. And a tip for after. God forbid anyone has to go through it, accept that what you went through was traumatic and seek help if you need it. Just because you survived doesn't mean you don't have scars. First rule, the teachers are freaking idiots. Do not hide under the desks. You're not protected or hidden. You're just lower and can't run. You're in a classroom that's on the edge of the campus. When the teacher runs in and tells everyone to hide, book it. Get out. She won't chase you. Why? Because the shooter doesn't care about you, your body, and it's a simple trade. If I chase this one running girl, other students can escape. But if I don't, I can go class to class and kill them. There's still some debate about whether or not it counts as terrorism, but I was about 20 feet from the car in Charlottesville. I wish I knew basic first aid. It took the ambulances like 10-15 minutes to arrive. So it was mostly the few Antifa protest medics that saved lives that day. Well, I didn't really survive anything, but I came close to going to 3 catastrophic events. Santika Club fire, 2006 Bangkok bombings, and then a bombing of a local shopping mall. In all 3 events, I didn't go because I wanted to stay home and be lazy. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.